and welcome back to this episode of This Healthy Life podcast. I'm very excited for my guest today. I have Christie Lee, and we're going to be discussing a topic that has not been on the podcast yet, so super excited to dive into this. Christie Lee is a registered dietitian, and she is an expert in endometriosis. She's joining us from Australia today, which is super exciting. I think that's another first as well. I don't think I've actually had a guest in Australia yet, so 2 firsts in 1 episode. So this is going to definitely be an exciting episode. And Christie, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much. I'm so thrilled that I'm the first Aussie.
Welcome. Awesome.
Thank you so much.
Christie,
I'm so thrilled to be.
Yeah,
Sorry.
Absolutely. No worries. So I'd love for you to kind of give everyone a quick introduction, a little bit of your background and, what you specialize in and how you got into this space.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for introducing me. I'm Christie. I'm an endometriosis dietitian living in Perth, Australia. And I wasn't always working in this very niche field of endo. I actually started out as a women's fertility, pregnancy, and I also had this other specialization in gut health, IBS nutrition, all of that space. So if I take you back to, I guess when I first met my very first endometriosis client, I didn't actually know she had endo and she didn't know she had endo. But what I found was that in the assessment I did with her, she was telling me things like, I have terrible periods. Every month I'm stuck in bed. I can't go to work every day. I'm vomiting. And then I also have these awful bowels. Like I get constipated all the time. Sometimes I have diarrhea. I'm bloated. I look somewhere between 4 to 6 months pregnant. And all of these symptoms were essentially being ignored by her doctors. And I think for me at the time, as a dietitian, it was like, well, okay, this is what I do. This is my specialty in this area. But if you have both of them together, there's something that you need to know. And there's something called endometriosis. Have you ever heard of that before? And she said, no, I've never heard of that before. And it just shocked me that, for someone who had experienced this she had been experiencing for this up to 10 years at the time, that no one had even said the word endometriosis. She'd never heard of it before. And so I decided that I would help her with trying to get a diagnosis for this because no one was helping her at the time. And I was shocked that going through this process myself with her, I also hit huge roadblocks. And I would be on the phone, I would be writing letters to her doctor, trying to get them to even just refer her to a gynecologist to take a deeper look. And they were essentially saying, no, I don't think that's necessary. And so we ended up going and finding different health professionals to work with us so that we could get through to, having a diagnosis or just being taken seriously is really what we wanted to achieve. And through that process of helping her, I think I really, for the first time myself, experienced firsthand the pushback, the humiliation, the gaslighting that was happening in endometriosis. And at the time, being a young dietitian, I had no idea that was going on. I knew about endo. I'd learned about all of this in uni, but it wasn't, I didn't have the lived experience. And so through that, taking her through that experience, I thought, oh my gosh, we need to do more about this. So I ended up becoming I would almost even call myself an annoying advocate. And I started talking to more women about endometriosis. The more people I spoke to, the more I heard the same story, the gaslighting, the ignoring, and just the whole period pain is normal kind of conversation. And yeah, I just kind of got obsessed and wrapped up in this entire world and just started doing more training, expanding my knowledge in the area. And then one day I just got the bravery to go, you know what, I'm just going to do this. This is all I want to do. I love it. I love helping people in this area. It makes me it gets me excited to wake up every single day and get out of bed because I feel like I'm making a really big difference. And the people I work with are so deserving. They've just not been heard. They've not been even, I guess, they've just never had someone really take the time with them to really listen. And I think that for both me and for my clients, it's been just a wonderful experience. So that's how I got here. And I've been here for the last 5 years and I'm not going anywhere.
Awesome. So that's mostly what you specialize in nowadays then, is mostly helping women with endo and kind of the diet side of things then.
That's right. It's all I
Awesome.
do every day. It's my bread and butter.
Sad that there's so many people suffering and that so many people, I mean, it just seems like this is such a common theme that I hear so much about here on my podcast and in my own personal health journey is just like doctors just like gaslighting you and not really taking your symptoms seriously. And you really having to be your own advocate to kind of, dig deep and find what's going on and find people like you that are out there helping people that are like, hey, have you looked at this? Has anyone ever tested you for this? So it's great that you're out there helping women. So
Thank you.
yeah, absolutely. So for those that may not be familiar with what endo is or endometriosis, can you give us kind of just like an overview or a breakdown of exactly kind of what it is? And, you've mentioned some of the symptoms that come with it, but how it usually manifests in someone.
Yeah, and I think it's a long word, and a lot of people go, "Oh, like endometriosis, my God." And I think understanding it takes just a little bit of context in making sure someone understands even just simple anatomy of the female body. And so I'll just start very briefly there. But and everybody who menstruates essentially has a uterus. And the uterus, every single month, it builds up a lining. That thickening of nutrition and blood that lines the uterus is what we see when we have our periods. So throughout the cycle, and the female menstrual cycle is not just your period. There's 4 phases to it. And so as it's building and growing throughout the cycle, we get to the menstrual phase and you have your period and that sheds. And that shedding is when we see blood leaving the body. So I think a lot of people know about like the period aspect, but don't quite think about, oh, this lining is growing throughout the month. Now, in somebody who has endometriosis, they also go through this process, but we also see that lining, that thickening, it's called the endometrium of the uterus. We find those cells in other parts of the body too. And it's not where we expect to find them. We only want to find them inside the uterus, and then we want them to leave the body every time we have our period. And so in someone with endo, we find these endometrial-like cells, and we call them like because they're not actually the endometrium, but they're very similar. They make estrogen. They can essentially create their own inflammation. They are found in the pelvic cavity. They could be on the outside of the uterus. They could be on the ovaries. They could be even as far as the lung, the heart, and the eye. And we've seen really extreme cases where people have diaphragmatic endo. And that's wild. But in most people, we find it kind of trapped in the pelvic area. Now, going back to what we now understand about the menstrual cycle, when someone has their period, that lining of the uterus sheds and it leaves the body. But in someone who has endometriosis, if the cells are inside the pelvic cavity, they're trapped in there. And so they go through the same process. They shed every single month. And that bleeding and shedding of endometrial-like cells gets trapped in the pelvic cavity or wherever they're located at the time. And that is not good. Obviously, it causes pain, it causes inflammation, and it's largely because the immune system is detecting these misplaced cells and this shedding and this blood stuck in the pelvic cavity and goes, oh my gosh, let's get this out. We need to remove it and clear it. But it doesn't do a very good job of it. And so we get this kind of chronic low-grade amount of inflammation that happens all the time. And the longer you live with endo, the more this chronic inflammation kind of compounds on top of each other. And so throughout life, the pain can go from just having period pain to having pain that may persist all month long. It could happen any day of the month, could happen every single day. And so some people have the most extreme symptoms where they're debilitated. Some people need walking aids. They can't go to work. They can't get out of bed. And some people have more mild symptoms, and it's an awful condition to have, and it's quite frankly just frightening that more people haven't had help before. We know that somewhere between 1 in 7 and 1 in 10 people with of people who menstruate have endometriosis.
Wow, that's so high.
It is literally as common as diabetes.
Wow.
Like, it's just wild how common it is, and it's only just getting a lot of traction now.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And then, so if you are someone that suspects that maybe you do have endo and you're having some of these symptoms and, doctors haven't been able to find out what's wrong with you, what's the best way to kind of go about finding out if you have endo? Are there certain tests that you can do? Or what are kind of the best diagnostic tools to rule it out?
Yeah, this is a good question. So the first thing you'll want to do is find a GP, a primary care practitioner, someone that you can trust, and hopefully you have someone that you've had following you for some time, maybe through your teens and early and 20s. But if not, that's okay. Go and find one, and look for someone who has a women's health interest, because I think don't be surprised if the first person you come across maybe doesn't know about endo. Like, it's a bit shocking, but a lot of GPs actually don't know much about endo. They may have heard the word at best, but they really don't know what to do with it. And so there might be pushback at that very first trying to reach out for help. So do not for a minute think it's all in your head, or that it's a you problem. You just need to find someone who understands period issues a little bit more deeply. So keep looking for the next person if you need to. Understand their interests if there's a women's health interest, because at that point they will be able to direct you to a gynecologist. And the gynecologist is someone who will know much more about endometriosis, and they will explore different testing or diagnostic options. So they may look at some blood testing to rule out other conditions. They may look at ultrasound and MRI. And then as the final place of diagnosis, it will be a surgery. And that's called a laparoscopic surgery. It's a keyhole surgery where they will have a look inside to see if they can find these misplaced cells, these endometrial-like cells in other parts of your body. They'll take a little sample and they'll biopsy it and then confirm if it's endometriosis.
Wow.
And
that's an invasive diagnosis, huh?
Extremely invasive. And that's why there's a really exciting movement happening here in Australia in particular, but even in Canada, when we know of a couple of surgeons who are pioneering ultrasound diagnosis now. And so you can find some practitioners who can link you up with advanced ultrasound diagnostics, where they may be able to detect it on imaging first. And if we can go with that option first, like, you want to try and find it before you have to go in for surgery. If we can avoid surgery, that's amazing. But at this stage, in most places in the world, it is still surgery as the gold standard diagnostic.
Okay. All right. Interesting. And then, so let's talk about the symptoms a little bit. So you mentioned some of them, like the bloating, having, I guess, what they call the endo belly, right? If you want to kind of share a little bit about what that means,
Yes.
and what that feels like, and what that is exactly.
Endo belly is actually probably, just the amount of people I've had ask me about bloating and not realize that it was a symptom of endometriosis is wild. And I think because the gut and the period stuff haven't been so well explained together, I think, for a lot of people. But the main symptoms that someone experiences are, so pain would cover things like, so period pain every month. You may also experience pain that goes into the back, the legs, deep into the pelvis. And it can be during sex as well. So anything in that kind of area tends to be very sensitive. Then we have this interesting connection with the gut. I can talk about that soon. But essentially bloating, which is called endo belly, so it's where your belly pops out like you're 4 to 6 months pregnant. It could be first thing in the morning, or it may be something that develops across the day. There's diarrhea, constipation. Sometimes that's with your period, or it could be all month long as well. Gut pain and nausea. They're probably like the key things, but I suppose we haven't talked about infertility. And about 50% of people who essentially go to a fertility specialist for IVF treatment typically have endometriosis.
Do they know they have it, or does it undiagnose endometriosis?
Yeah. In fact, I would have to say that it's probably the most common place people finally get an endo diagnosis, because people are going to their doctors for period issues for years. And to be honest, it gets ignored until they want to have a baby. Oh, and all of a sudden, because they can't fall pregnant, it's like, oh, maybe we should investigate endometriosis. And that's typically when it comes up. So a lot of people do find out at that point.
Yeah. And then, so it's an autoimmune condition, right? Is that correct?
Not quite correct.
Not quite? Okay.
So we think that it has autoimmune-like features, and I definitely talk a lot about that in the work I do, but we can't exactly explicitly say it is an autoimmune condition, and it's because we haven't seen enough of like the genetic or the epigenetic evidence that it is definitely, and it's because the research is so lacking in the endometriosis space. The female body in general has received very little attention in research over decades. And so whilst it's not quite autoimmune, we know that the immune system is involved because it's an inflammatory condition, and also the gut is involved as well, which is our largest immune organ.
And what do you see as common triggers to kind of like trigger it on, right? Because is it going to be some sort of like dietary issues? Is it exposure to like environmental toxins? Is it hormones? What are some common triggers that kind of set it off in certain women versus other women that don't experience it?
Yeah. Okay. So when I look at triggers for people with endo, there's typically two groups or types of people who have, or I guess the way the symptoms present in endo. So you have group number one, which is where the symptoms only present with the menstrual cycle. So they might be feeling pretty good, no symptoms, normal kind of life, and they go about their day as usual through the month. But then as sort of post ovulation, as we get into that luteal phase of the cycle, and especially as soon as day one or even the day before you menstruate, the symptoms all roll in, and it gets very, very, extreme in nature with the pain and all of the, the gut stuff too. So someone like that has triggers of inflammation and hormones being at the core of that. And so then when we kind of go back to then, okay, well, what's triggering inflammation? What's triggering hormone changes? One, of course, there's the natural physiological events going on in the body. So periods are actually naturally inflammatory events, and our hormones drop as soon as we go into our menstrual phase. So there's that natural physiological thing going on. But then if we take a step back and look at what's actually within our control, or maybe like modifiable factors, we understand that other inflammatory, or the inflammatory load of the body at the time, will also contribute to that. So if we're looking at diet, we're looking at the gut microbiome, we're looking at environmental toxins and EDCs, which are hormonal disruptors from the environment, even things like a bad night's sleep or a high stress day, or smoking, even too much alcohol or drug use, things like that. And hormones, of course, we know, I talked a little about those environmental hormonal disruptors, but we also know, some things with our diet impact our hormones, especially if we're skipping meals and going long periods without eating. If we are not going to bed and waking up at the same time every day, then our circadian rhythm and even our blood sugar levels, which affect hormone balance in the body, play a role too. So that's our cyclical endo warriors. And then for people that have more than just cyclical symptoms, so the symptoms seem to impact them either daily, weekly, or at least multiple times per week, they are a group of people that may have some other underlying stuff going on that triggers them too. And that's where we tend to see food triggers, like specific foods, being more of a role to play. So it could be things that increase gas, water in the bowel. It could be things that increase more inflammation in the body, like specific foods. And this is the kind of group of people that have usually lived with endo a little bit longer. And so we might be seeing gut dysbiosis or SIBO or other kind of more secondary or comorbid conditions popping up too. So yeah, I won't go too much into it, but if you fit into one of those categories, like there's definitely more that is within your control than just, resigning to the fact I just have endo and there's nothing I can do about it.
Absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about diet, because it sounds like gut health is a very key kind of integral part in this, right? It's not just like hormonal. It's not just about your periods. So, I mean, you're a dietitian, so obviously you're working with a lot of endo patients, and finding that diet is a valuable tool that can aid in your kind of recovery and maintenance of it. So how does diet affect it? Like tell us a little bit about what you're seeing of like what foods are working with people, what foods aren't, and what sort of dietary changes are people with endo having to make in order to feel better.
Yeah, amazing. And like, I guess one of the first things that people do when they get diagnosed is start Googling endo, and diet will come up. Diet's probably one of the most, I guess it's like the most common thing people will attempt to do themselves at home. And it's very easy to fall down rabbit holes of what is like working for somebody else, or even just like what like the latest blog is telling you to do. And you definitely want to be careful of this area, because there's a lot of opinion and not a lot of it is evidence-based either. So when it comes to the relationship between diet and endo, it's going back to what I call the 3 hallmarks of endo, which are driving the symptoms, because endo, we don't actually know what causes endo yet. If we knew what caused it, we would have a cure, and we don't have a cure yet, but we know what drives it. We know what's underlying it. And so we see inflammation, number one. Number two is hormonal imbalances. And number three is gut and immune dysfunction. And so when we actually then look at those drivers, there's so many different ways that we can actually improve those drivers, and that will help to reduce symptoms. So if we jump to, because I've talked quite a bit about inflammation and hormones just before, if we jump into the gut and immune space, I mentioned just a little bit earlier that the gut is home to good 70 to almost 80% of all immune cells in the body, and which makes the gut the largest immune organ. So when essentially you're experiencing this chronic inflammation from these misplaced cells, the immune system's always active. And if the immune system's always active, it means that then the gut is becoming quite dysfunctional because it's always turned on and it's getting quite exhausted. So this is when we see problems with digesting food. We see the microbiome, which is the bacteria that live in our gut, moving into places we don't expect it to move. So we might see bacteria moving up into the small intestine. That can cause a lot of bloating and pain for people. And we see a lot of IBS. And with the whole IBS space, we know that endo is the underlying reason, but we can do lots of strategies to help manage IBS and SIBO together that help to alleviate symptoms and therefore improve the immune system too. So diet, obviously, our gut is where we digest food. So the food that goes into our body, it impacts the health of our gut. Our food also impacts the amount of inflammation in our body, and it impacts the way our hormones work together. And so what we do in the work with my clients is that we tackle each of these hallmarks one by one. And it's something that needs to be in like a particular order, because if we try to get someone to eat lots of fruits and vegetables, for example, which we know are beautiful for an anti-inflammatory diet, some of those foods might be triggers for some people. And so we actually need to take a little step back, find out what those triggers are first before we can build out more of a long-term sustainable diet for somebody.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm, absolutely. And then are there certain like foods right off the bat that you take out, like gluten or dairy, like foods that we know are like inflammatory for, most people on the planet? Are there certain things that you're just like, all right, these definitely have to come out while we're kind of working on your gut? Or what's kind of your approach to getting someone started on their new diet?
Yeah, our approach, so we actually have a really strong focus in our work on helping people uncover what is uniquely triggering for them. And I think that actually I personally probably get a little bit tired of generic food lists that say like everybody should cut out a certain type of food. And a lot of that happens in endo. We see like a lot of blanket rules. Everyone should cut out red meat. Everyone should cut out eggs. Everyone should cut out gluten. Everyone should cut out dairy. It can even fall down into like just cut out carbs, cut out sugar, cut out caffeine, cut out. And I call it the cut out diet. And it's this huge focus on just removing things from the diet. And what we like to do with our clients is take them through a process of looking at their unique health, their unique body situation, and learning, does gluten serve me or does it not? Does dairy work for me? Does it make me feel uncomfortable? Does, red meat? And what we find most in our clients is that people can tolerate most foods. It's just working out how much and how often they can actually tolerate it. It's actually not so black and white. So some people may find that they can tolerate sourdough breads instead of, having to go completely gluten-free. Some people can tolerate like goat's cheeses, but they can't tolerate cow's milk proteins. And so we kind of work with people to understand this. That means that you can still have, if you can still eat sourdough and you can still have a lovely piece of goat's cheese and you can still enjoy your favorite coffee or a little bit of wine or things. This is what life is about. It's about being able to enjoy food, because food is more than just nutrition. It's nostalgia, it's community, it's family, it's joy. And so we don't want someone who's already got endo with all of these awful symptoms also then feeling like they can't enjoy food too. So we use what we call so once we uncover triggers with people and create their unique diet, we then look at a crowding out approach when it comes to food. So rather than saying strictly you cannot eat this or you can't eat this for whatever reason, let's actually look at what we can add in, and then that crowds out the maybe less desirable food that doesn't serve them so well. And so it becomes more of a what can I add in focus rather than what do I have to cut out focus.
Absolutely. No, I think that's so important because, everyone is so different and unique, and what works for me may not work for the next person. And so I think it's really about kind of finding what works for your body and what foods support you and what foods cause more stress, and, really kind of dialing that in. So I think that's a great approach. And so as far as, okay, so diet definitely sounds like it's one huge piece of the puzzle to, managing symptoms and things like that. What are some other things that people can be doing to help manage symptoms? Are there conventional things that work or people suggest, or are there more holistic things that are more supportive of women that are dealing with this? Or what's kind of your take on other supportive therapies that can help?
Yeah, I think it's so important to have the conversation of the toolbox in this context, because a lot of people are very focused on what's the best thing, what's the one thing I should be doing. And in fact, really what we want to focus on with endo is building out a health management toolbox, because endo is multifactorial. It affects multiple aspects of your well-being. It's not just a period issue. It affects the whole body. It affects your mental health. It affects your physical health. And when we look at all of the options out there, so the options being, I tend to look at the toolbox as medicine options or conventional medical options, nutrition, sleep, movement, and mind health or stress management. And so each of these pieces play a really important role. For some people, using conventional strategies like the birth control pill or coils, going for surgery, that kind of thing. Some of these things work wonders for people. And I will never take that away from someone who's like, but I did this and I feel amazing and it's just changed my life. I can go to work, my relationship is better, I've been able to have a family, whatever it might be. And so for some people, these strategies work, and for some, they cause significant side effects and heartache. And so when that's at play, it puts a little bit more emphasis on wanting to lean into some of the other holistic strategies. I think everybody should do everything, because we know that you won't experience multiple surgeries or be less likely to have multiple surgeries, be less likely to need so many pills and medication if you lean into nutrition, movement, sleep, and mind health. But even more so for the people who can't really go down that conventional path so easily. So build out your toolbox, and to reduce overwhelm for people, don't feel the need to do it all at once. That's, you're going to kind of go home with all this homework and think, oh my God, how do I do all of this? I really educate people to look at their symptoms and focus on what is the most kind of impactful symptom for them right now, and then link that back to something that can help alleviate that symptom. So it could be like, if your mental health is really, really struggling, anxiety, depression, then probably getting counseling and therapy and support is going to be the number one area to look into, and really spend a good 3 months in that season of really leaning into mental health and looking after yourself in that regard. And then when you've kind of added that tool to your toolkit, you can kind of move on to the next thing. And, take your time. Endo is, it is a lifelong condition to manage, and their time is not running out to work through each of these areas of health.
Absolutely. Awesome. And then, so I want to shift gears a little bit. So you've been, working with women with endo for quite a while now, and, have had a lot of experience talking to different women on different parts of their journey. What's kind of one or two key stories that stick out to you as just an amazing transformation or kind of healing process in their journey that you've experienced?
Oh my gosh, where do I start?
There's probably so many, I know.
Oh my gosh,
it's hard to pick one.
Let me think of, so I'm thinking of a client that I had. She was actually someone who was from the UK living in Germany, and I work with people all over the world. So that's wonderful. But she came to me with essentially all of those typical gut issues, constipation, diarrhea, her stomach hurt all the time. She had a lot of those period issues. And this is really that, I guess, our specialty is in helping people with that combination of these two. She really wanted to start a family, but she was terrified of coming off hormonal therapy, because before hormonal therapy, she had excruciating periods where she couldn't even leave bed. With hormonal therapy, she's able to work, she's able to do some normal things in her life. Everything isn't kind of like perfect, but it did make a big difference for her. So she came to work with us because she wanted to start a family, but she wanted to have a tool or something else that she could utilize to manage symptoms while off hormonal therapy. And I was recommended to her in the beginning, like, don't change anything with your medication just yet. Let's spend a good number of months. And we ended up working together for 6 months to really kind of like uncover your triggers, reduce your inflammation, balance your hormones, and really get your confidence to do this right up there before we take anything away. And we worked through this process together. She was absolutely just beautiful person. And then finally, in the end there, we took away her hormonal medication. And we see this time and time again when people have moved through these steps, that they take away this hormonal medication and almost like brace themselves, like, oh my God, what's going to happen? Her first period that came, which is a withdrawal bleed, it had some like little bit of cramping, and she was like, oh no, I feel like this is just going to get worse and worse. Her next bleed, which was her natural period, she had zero issues at all. She went to work. She was able to do everything that she would normally do. And I will always say, like, people will still always notice a little bit of cramping, and to some extent, like cramping and because I said before, like, periods are naturally inflammatory events. So we will notice some symptoms during our periods, but should never stop you from doing your daily activities. And so she was able to successfully start trying. It took I think it was about 7 or 8 months, and they finally fell pregnant.
Oh, that's amazing.
Which is wonderful. And then they've actually just had their little baby just recently. So
that's awesome.
Yeah, so thrilled for them.
Yeah, that's great. Especially with like someone that's like struggles so much with that, right? And who knows like how long she went doctor to doctor as well, trying to figure out what was going on before she finally was able to uncover it. So that's awesome. I love hearing successful transformation stories like that. Awesome. And then I want to talk a little bit, you have a free masterclass as well. It's called Steal Our Endo Nutrition Roadmap. Is that right?
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. Do you want to share a little bit about that and how people can access that and what that is?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is one of our most popular trainings that we offer. It's essentially a training where we show people what we do with our clients and the exact step-by-step strategy that we take them through to help them relieve their period pain, their bloating, their funky poops, which is like constipation, diarrhea. I just like to say that because it's funny. And fatigue. And so with all of the noise that's online at the moment, with all of the different diets and the influences out there, it gets very, very confusing to know what is actually science-based in the world of endometriosis and diet. We really wanted to set the record straight, and we also know how hard it is to afford to see all of the health practitioners for someone with endo as well. So we wanted to create a free training, somewhere that people can come and learn what is evidence-based, and then how we actually work with our clients and help them so that they can walk away with knowing what is true, and then what are the steps that they can follow as well. And whether that be if they want to go and work on it themselves, it's totally fine. If they feel inclined to work with us at the end of that, then there's an opportunity that people can come and work with us as well. So they can find this on our Instagram or our website. Maybe we'll put something like a link in the show notes perhaps for them.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. We can link to it for sure. So awesome. Amazing, Christie. Well, thank you so much. If people want to reach out and find you, we'll go ahead and link to everything in the show notes as well. And yeah, thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.